Head coach Mike White and the Texas women's softball team are now one win away from their first national championship in program history as they just defeated the Texas Tech Red Raiders, the 12th national seed, Texas being the 6th overall national seed, 2-1 in what was a very controversial but also very tightly contested pitcher's duel between Nigeri Kennedy and Tegan Kavan, the sophomore stud in the circle for the Horns. Texas wins it on a 2-run RBI single by Reese Atwood in the bottom of the 6th inning, and Tegan Kavan closes out a shutout, her 4th shutout of the College World Series. And Texas will go for a national championship in one of these next 2 games. Hopefully, the hope for Horns fans is they can win their first national championship, close it out tomorrow night. But in case they do lose tomorrow night, they do have that safety blanket of already having won game 1. Teams that win game 1 of a best-of-3 softball national championship series win the national championship 79% of the time. So it's still no guarantees, but Mike White and this Texas softball team, helped by Tegan Kavan and Reese Atwood, certainly have put themselves in great position to win their first softball national championship. Welcome back to Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. My name is Michael Wein. You can find me at Michael_Wein1 on X. And I'm joined, as always, by my fellow Longhorn fan and also fellow Austinite, live from Austin right now, Mr. Emmy Nixon. You can find him at Emmy_Nixon on X or on social media. On today's show, it's the first, we're into the month of June. We are recording this on June 4th, late in the evening. You will likely be listening to this on Friday and or Saturday of this week, the 6th or the 7th of June. The 6th through the 8th, this Friday through this Sunday, is the first big recruiting official visit weekend for the Texas Longhorns. The first of 3 big official visit weekends, each of which we'll be talking about over the next, over the course of this month. We'll preview who's coming in this weekend and who are the guys you want to know. And we'll also get into a couple nuggets from this past weekend's Elite Camp, where Texas hosted some big-time 2027 quarterbacks, along with some other 2027 and 2028 prospects. And then the second half of today's show is maybe what I'm most excited for. We're getting into our 2025 NBA Draft player profiles. We're going to be doing 3 player profiles today: Cooper Flagg, and then the 2 Rutgers prospects, the top 3 prospects in this draft, Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. I'm really excited to get into that. We'll get into that on the back half of the show. And we do have a fun parting shot planned for you guys as well, related to Texas basketball. So, Emmy Nixon, I welcome you into today's show. We just recorded a Make Your Case episode earlier this evening. That will also be out on Friday. So if you're more interested in that, that's fine. Go check it out. But for our Longhorn fans here today, Emmy Nixon, what's up, man? And where's your head out right now when it comes to the Texas Longhorns? What's going on in the 40 acres? Can be good or bad.
A lot of big football recruiting, a lot of big transfer portal stuff with the baseball team already. But first and foremost, that softball team, I mean, they're killing it, man. They're one more win and they've got their national title. That would be amazing. And hopefully they'll get it done, man.
Yeah, and I don't know if you'll be around, but I might go live if they do get it done. If they do win the national title, I might have to do a little live stream reaction to that. Of course, the baseball season has ended in a kind of disappointing fashion. The number 2 overall seed, national seed, Texas Longhorns, get knocked out of their regional, along with number 1 seed Vanderbilt and a bunch of other hosts and SEC teams. In fact, here's your stat for today. 13 SEC teams made the NCAA tournament. 8 of them were hosts. Only 4 of them are advancing to the Super Regionals. Only 4 of 13 SEC teams are advancing to this weekend's Super Regionals. So not necessarily a strong performance for the SEC over regional weekend. UTSA, you give them credit. We're going to do kind of a post-mortem Texas baseball segment and talk about some of the portal action that's happening next week. Texas already landed their first portal commitment. I don't know if you saw it earlier today, or earlier this evening, actually. So we'll get into that more next week. But, I mean, overall, it was a fun baseball season. It ended in a disappointing fashion, but Texas was able to lead this year with a lot of momentum, I think, going into next year, and that they were able to at least accomplish winning the regular season title. So we'll get more into baseball next week, but it has to be mentioned. And the softball as well is particularly exciting. But let's go ahead and get into today's show. We're going to start with Texas football recruiting. We're going to take a look at this weekend's official visits. Are you ready to get into this? All right. So there are 12 or 13 names here that are coming in this weekend. Each of the next 2 weekends are going to be bigger in terms of volume of prospects that are visiting. This first weekend's typically a little bit smaller in terms of volume of prospects that are coming in. But there are still some big-time names, big-time targets on the menu for this weekend. And just so we clear up, for anyone who doesn't know, an official visit is paid for by the university. So it's 48 hours. It typically takes place it starts at a certain time on Friday, ends at a certain time on Sunday, and everything is paid for by the university. The travel, the hotels that the prospects stay in, everything's laid out and planned. It's a planned weekend where these coaches are recruiting and kind of making the hay of what will end up being the 2026 Texas Longhorns recruiting class. First guy we're going to talk about is actually already a Texas commit. And we talked about him a couple weeks ago on Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. He committed back on May 9th. He's out of the state of Louisiana, from the New Orleans area, out of Edna Carr High School. He's a Texas commit. He committed back on May 9th. Hayward Howard Jr., a cornerback, a 4-star cornerback. He's going to be taking his official visit to Texas. Texas really impressed him on his unofficial visit back in April. 6'2", 185 pounds, has room to fill out on his frame, but a really solid player. He hasn't actually ruled out taking any other official visits. He might visit Miami later in the month. If that happens, things could certainly get interesting, as they could, in the fall. These out-of-state recruitments, out-of-state commitments can be a little more shaky, as I talked about last episode, than in-state commitments. But he's shown no signs of wavering in his commitment to Texas in the just over 3 or 4 weeks since he's been committed. He's got a good relationship with the staff, and I think Texas will do a good job. I think the goal this week with Hayward Howard Jr., who's a top 15 prospect nationally, or I guess in the state of Louisiana, he's considered that way by pretty much all 4 services. It will be important for Texas to kind of make sure that he's 100% committed this weekend, and they typically do a pretty good job of that. He's got a good relationship with Coach Sark. He's built already a really good relationship with new cornerbacks coach Mark Orfe, who was actually recruiting him when he was still at Rutgers. So they had that relationship going. There's also a draw to play for Dwayne Aquina, one of the best secondary coaches in college football history, who's back at Texas. So the goal here is just make that relationship even stronger and keep a guy like Hayward Howard Jr., who kind of sets the floor, I think, for this secondary class that Texas is going to put together. Any thoughts on Hayward Howard Jr. before we get into some other names?
No, I think you touched on just about everything, man. I think he's a corner that we'll be speaking on quite a bit in the coming months.
Okay, just really quickly before we get into some other big names, there's lots of speculation, and I think it's very likely with the changes coming that we're going to go from, in the SEC, the SEC is going to expand from an 85 scholarship limit to a 105 scholarship limit next year, as the Big Ten is doing this year. So with that, Texas is able to take on more scholarships because these are 2026 guys. They won't be on campus till next year when that rule supposedly will be in effect. And if you look at what's going on special teams, the state of the special teams at Texas, they get a new punter in the portal, and Jack Bomeister from Utah, right? They bring him in, but he's got 1 year of eligibility. They get a new kicker in Mason Shipley, right? But he doesn't have all that much eligibility left. I think it's 1, maybe 2 years left. I'm not 100% sure. And then the long snapper, Lance St. Louis, who has been typically a very good long snapper for them, he's a senior. He's out of eligibility after this year. So, with the extra scholarships, Texas is able to recruit specialists. So they're going to have Trot O'Neill, one of the best long snappers in the country. He's already committed to Texas out of Prestonwood Christian High School. He's got a very good relationship with Jeff Banks. They offered O'Neill when he visited last month, and then just a couple days after, he announced his decision to commit. He's going to be the guy that will step in as the long snapper after Lance St. Louis eligibility runs out next year. So just, if you see Lance St. Louis as a visit on Twitter, not Lance St. Louis, Trot O'Neill is the name here. He's the long snapper in this class. All right, let's get back into some big names. The biggest name, I think, this weekend that everyone needs to be aware of is Lamar Brown. He's a 5-star, super blue chip, offensive/defensive lineman. He's actually considered an athlete now by some services. Out of the state of Louisiana. He's rated the number 1 overall prospect in the country by ESPN. Out of Baton Rouge, University Lab High School. He's taking an official visit to Texas. This is a recruitment that has gained steam here in the months of April and May with the Longhorns. He's got a really good relationship. Kind of how this all came together is he's got a really good relationship with Texas's new edge coach, Alan Clark, who was an assistant defensive line coach and the edge coach for Ohio State last year, but has coached at multiple stops beforehand. He's been at multiple smaller schools, and so he was able to actually build a relationship with Lamar Brown at his previous stops. And so Lamar Brown actually kicked out Florida State and decided to visit Texas this weekend instead of Florida State, which is huge. Getting this guy on campus for an official visit is huge. Now, this guy's really good on offense and on defense. That's why he was given the athlete designation by Rivals. He's a 5-star lineman, basically. He plays defensive line and offensive line. So the question that's going to come up, and the question I'm sure you have is, well, what is Texas recruiting him as? Are they recruiting him as an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman? They're recruiting him as a defensive lineman, which is why Alan Clark is the main guy on this recruitment. But I'm sure Steve Sarkisian and Pete Kwiatkowski are involved as well. He's got a Texas official visit for this weekend. It's going to be a very important visit. We'll see if the Longhorns can continue to build on the momentum that they have. But they're battling LSU and Miami. Those are the schools mainly in the picture. I believe he just visited Miami, and he's going to be visiting LSU, if I have that right. But the fact that Texas is getting an official visit is huge. I kind of view this kind of similar to maybe what happened with Justice Terry just this past cycle in 2025, where Texas was able to steal a high-level defensive lineman from out of state late. So Alan Clark's a big part of this, but I'd highly recommend go watch Lamar Brown. He's certainly a stud both on the offensive line and defensive line. This to me is like the biggest headline visit for this weekend. That is Lamar Brown. Any thoughts there?
Not a whole lot, no.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move along. Another big time visit this weekend. Actually, a good amount of out of state kids this weekend. Davon Benjamin. He's a 4-star. He's listed as a safety. A 5-star safety. He's a super blue chip in my opinion. Out of Westlake Village Oaks Christian High School in California. I can't talk tonight for some weird reason. I think, based on what I'm hearing, Davon Benjamin is arguably Texas's top defensive back target left in this cycle. It's big time that they're getting him on campus. Getting a guy like this out of the state of California on campus is huge. He reminds me a lot of Jahdae Barron when he was coming out of high school, except I think he's better at this point in his career than Jahdae Barron was. And that's saying a lot because you look at what Jahdae Barron turned into. Not saying Davon Benjamin is going to turn into that, but he reminds me a lot of Jahdae mainly because he plays all over the secondary. He's listed as a safety, but he can play safety, he can play the nickel, and he can even play some outside. He was on campus for a visit in April. He's one of the top targets in the secondary. He loved his visit in April. And so he's back on campus for an official visit. He has a good relationship with the staff, Coach Akina, Johnny Nansen, who was a big hire last year on this defensive staff as an assistant defensive coordinator and linebackers coach. Pete Kwiatkowski is, of course, going to be big in this recruitment. But when you think about Hayward Howard Jr. and some of the other targets that Texas is going after in this secondary class, which I think is going to be 4 or 5 deep, Davon Benjamin is right at the top of that list. The problem is Miami's in this recruitment, Ohio State's in this recruitment, Oregon's in this recruitment, and Michigan is in this recruitment. So just that group of schools tells you, like, yeah, this kid's going to be good. He's wanted by all of these schools. He could play all over the field. But big-time visit in Davon Benjamin out of the state of California this weekend. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, dudes that can play corner, safety, and nickel and have experience doing all three going into college don't just grow on trees, man. I mean, I think the quality of schools going after him shows that, but also just like he can make an impact right away in the right situation. Like if a
I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Finish your point. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well,
Did you have anything else?
If you're in a tough spot in terms of depth and a guy goes down, having guys like this that already have that kind of instinctive high football IQ and can play in different spots, that's huge.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's tough to rank, like, in order of priority from the list of visitors this coming weekend, who's Texas's top priority and who's, like, it'd be hard to rank them that way. But I think in my opinion, the two biggest visits this weekend are Lamar Brown and Davon Benjamin, the guy that we just talked about. We'll talk about maybe 2 or 3 more of these names We're not going to go through all of them. We're going through the most important ones. The next most high profile, I would say, is Ezavier Crowell. Some call him EJ Crowell. I think that's like his nickname. But Ezavier Crowell, kind of a cool name. He's a highly rated running back. Some have him as a super blue chip. Could end up a 5-star, maybe by 1 or 2 services. Out of Jackson, Alabama. When you look at the state of running back recruiting from a 30,000-foot perspective, KJ Edwards is the biggest target for Texas. He's out of Carthage here in the state of Texas. He's their in-state guy they have to get, in my opinion, for it to be a successful running back class. But Ezavier Crowell is like in that next, he's right there next up, and like a guy that they could pair along with KJ Edwards to make like a really, really, really good running back recruiting class. This is a big visit. If Texas wants to win this recruitment, they're going to have to put a dent. They're going to have to find a way to put a dent in the momentum that Alabama has in this recruitment. He's in state. He's going to be hard to pull out of the state of Alabama, but it can be done. They're going to have to find a way to put a dent in Alabama's momentum, who I think leads this recruitment right now. But Texas has done this stuff before. Georgia got its crack at Ezavier Crowell this past weekend. Texas is up next. They're going to have to find a way. Chad Scott, the new running backs coach, who's built a relationship with Ezavier Crowell throughout his time as a running backs coach. And he's been big on Ezavier Crowell ever since he got to Texas a couple of months ago. He's going to have to find a way to change the momentum here. I don't believe, if I had to make a prediction for who Texas is going to get in this class right now, I wouldn't tell you that Ezavier Crowell is going to be part of it. But that could change after this weekend. We'll just have to see. So I think Alabama still has the edge. Texas is in the running for a couple other high-profile running backs. If they're not able to get Crowell, they could get a couple other guys who are going to be visiting in coming weekends, which we'll talk about. But we'll see how this weekend goes for Ezavier Crowell. It's going to be difficult, though, to get him out of the state of Alabama. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think he set his decision date for the 26th, based on what I kind of had written down. He's someone that, when he's spoken to media, like has expressed like not just valuing like the football situation, but also like wanting to go to a school that can best develop him as a player. And you know, with Texas having a new running backs coach, I wonder how much that plays into it. And hopefully, you know, they'll be able to win him over regardless of the fact that the running back coach hasn't been here for that long.
Yeah. You know, that would be a big one. If they're able to get KJ Edwards and Ezavier Crowell, just go ahead and mark down an A+ on running back recruiting for 2026. 2 other names, both on the defensive side of the ball, one in-state, one out-of-state. Texas is actually going very big in the state of Louisiana this cycle. It's an observation that I've kind of realized over the past couple of weeks. But if you just look at this weekend, I mean, they've got Lamar Brown coming in from Baton Rouge. He's the 5-star offensive lineman, defensive lineman we talked about earlier. They've got this kid, Dylan Berryman is his name. He's a interior defensive lineman, defensive tackle out of Monroe, Louisiana. Alchita Parish High School, I think is how you pronounce it. He's one of their top defensive line targets, along with Lamar Brown, who they're recruiting on defense. Dylan Berryman's another top defensive line target, who they're going to have to pull out of the state of Louisiana. But this was originally a Texas-LSU battle which would make sense, right, for a kid that's in the state of Louisiana. Um, but I favor the Longhorns here. I still like that pick. I favored the Longhorns back in February. I still like the Longhorns here. Um, you know, it's the other schools not named LSU, actually, that have actually kind of closed the gap on Texas. Namely, Purdue. Purdue's a surprise team in this recruitment. You don't see a lot of high school head-to-head battles in fact, any high school head-to-head battles between Texas and Purdue. But that's kind of what this has turned into. This is a very unique recruitment for a defensive lineman out of the state of Louisiana. But he's very talented. He's one of their top defensive line targets. It's up to Kenny Baker to continue the momentum after a very solid defensive line class in his first year as the defensive line coach. Getting guys like this is important so that you don't have to go to the transfer portal every single year to get 3, 4, 5 defensive linemen. And I think that's what Kenny Baker is going to do a better job of than Bo Davis was able to. But I favor Dylan Berryman. He's got family in the Austin. I favor Dylan Berryman to Texas because he's got family in the Austin area. And I just don't see a kid like that going to Purdue. I think Texas will be able to win the NIL battle there. And I think they're the favorites. And I think this visit will only, as long as nothing goes wrong, will only cement that. So I expect Dylan Berryman to be in this class. But as I was saying, like the state of Louisiana, they already got Hayward Howard Jr., the corner, out of Edna Carr. They're bringing in Dylan Berryman out of Monroe. They're bringing in Lamar Brown, the 5-star defensive lineman, offensive lineman out of Baton Rouge. They're going big in the state of Louisiana. That's a big-time state for Texas. And if they can pull all these guys out of there, like, go ahead and get a Rouse because that's what elite programs do. Last name. I knew that was going to come up at some point. Anyway. Jamarian Carlton. He's an edge rusher from Temple here in the state of Texas. Texas needs to recapture some momentum in this recruitment. He's the nation's number 3 edge rusher / defensive lineman, according to 24/7. Listed at 6'4.5", 245 pounds. He's I think their top edge rushing target. It'd be great if Texas could continue to stack that room with more elite talent. I don't think he's on the level of a Colin Simmons per se, but he's up there in super blue chip territory. He was at LSU this past weekend. He still has trips lined up to Baylor and Texas A&M. Texas was considered a favorite very early on in this process, but others have caught up, including Texas A&M, who I think will end up being Texas's biggest competition here. But I think with a good visit this weekend, Texas can certainly change the momentum because ever since I've kind of started to get to know the 2026 recruiting class, Jamarian Carlton is a guy that I've kind of penciled into this recruiting class. So, Jamarian Carlton, Dylan Berryman, Ezavier Crowell, the running back, Davon Benjamin, the secondary / safety, hybrid safety player from the state of California, and Lamar Brown, along with Hayward Howard Jr., already committed. Those are like the biggest visits this weekend. Any final thoughts or questions for me about this weekend as it pertains to the guys coming in or just recruiting in general before we move on?
Well, I did want to ask you about one edge rusher, Luke Wafel. He's a 4-star from New Jersey. What have you heard on his recruitment? I think Penn State is involved with that one, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so the latest I've heard, Texas is involved there. They are interested. I don't. I'd have to look at the list of visits. I don't know if he has a visit set to Texas. He might over the course of the next 2 weekends, but Penn State's definitely the leader there. They have a lot of momentum with him. Very talented kid. I think the thing to watch would be, can Texas get him on campus for an official visit? I'd have to double check. I'll get back to you by the end of the episode to see if he has an official visit scheduled. But if he doesn't, Texas would have to kind of figure out a way to squeeze him in for an official visit to kind of change the momentum of that recruitment. But they are interested. He's another edge rusher along with Carlton that they are certainly involved with. Any other questions?
No, that's it.
I love it, man. I love how you're just pulling out these names left and right all of a sudden.
Getting into it.
Wayful. You're getting into it. I love it. All right. Well, actually, I want to address one more thing. I want to put myself on the record now. Who I think will be in this class. We're gonna do like at the end of June, after all the official visits have taken place. One of these episodes, we're gonna do a full recruiting class prediction. We'll go at each position and who we think's are gonna who I think's gonna be in the class after official visits take place. But just right now, off the hoof, I want to make some predictions on who I think come December will be in this recruiting class from the visits this weekend. Okay, so really quick, here they are. Hayward Howard Jr., I think he sticks with Texas. He's the corner out of New Orleans, who's already committed. Trot O'Neal, he's the long snapper that we talked about. He'll be in this class for sure. Dylan Berryman, the defensive lineman out of the state of Louisiana, I think he's going to be in this class, out of Monroe. I think Jamarian Carlton will be in this class, the edge rusher out of Temple. So that's 4. And then I don't think Texas gets Ezavier Crowell, the running back out of Alabama, as of right now. I'll say they get one of Davon Benjamin or Lamar Brown. I don't think they're going to get both as of right now. This could all change in a month. As of right now, I think they're going to get one of Davon Benjamin, the safety out of California, or Lamar Brown. And right now, I'll say they get Lamar Brown as the guy in this recruiting class. So those are my predictions as of June 4th, before these visits even take place, of who's going to end up in this class. Are we ready to move on to NBA draft? I'm super pumped.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
All right. So the way this is going to work, Emmy, do you want to explain?
Yeah. So we're going to be doing player profiles for 3 prospects tonight. Three of the top prospects. The top 2 guys, obviously, are the top 2 guys. Ace Bailey, depending on who you ask, is the 3rd guy. Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, and Ace Bailey. What we're going to do is, for each player, we're going to be sharing a fun fact, an underrated stat, and an interesting nugget, and giving a tangible skill and an intangible skill. And then the third thing will be an X factor for their eventual career success in the NBA.
Yeah, this should be fun. So let's go ahead and get into it. We'll start with Cooper Flagg, who's, I think, the number 1 consensus overall prospect in this class. Emmy, do you have a fun fact or a fun stat or an interesting nugget you want to share about Cooper Flagg?
Well, a couple things, actually. Cooper Flagg is a stud golfer, apparently. Apparently he's like a scratch golfer. Like, when he goes out with whoever it is, he hang with anybody. But another thing is, he was the youngest ever recipient of the USA Basketball Male Athlete of the Year award at the age of 15, and it came from his performance at the 2022 FIBA Under-17 World Cup, where he led the U.S. to a gold medal. So, yeah.
Okay. I'll add a couple just general background that I find interesting. A lot of people don't know, or may not know, but Cooper Flagg actually hails from the state of Maine. He was born in Newport, Maine. That's where his family is from, his immediate family at least. And he attended Nokomis Regional High School, I believe is how you pronounce it. He became the first freshman to be named the Maine Gatorade Player of the Year after he averaged 20.5 points, 10 rebounds, 6.2 assists, 3.5 steals, and 3.7 blocks per game as a freshman in high school.
Holy fuck.
And then he transferred, of course, after his freshman year to Montverde Academy down in Montverde, Florida, where he played the rest of his high school career. But he is from the state of Maine, and he was the first ever freshman to win the Maine Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Maine. And his family, his mother actually played women's college basketball at Maine University, and that's where his brother Ace Flagg, similarly to how Ace Bailey, I guess, is named. His brother's name is Ace. His brother Ace Flagg will be at Maine this coming season playing college basketball. So, just a couple more fun background facts about this monster that is Cooper Flagg. And of course, everyone knows he was at Duke and all the accolades he racked up at Duke. We don't really have to reiterate that. Okay, let's get down to the nitty gritty. What is your biggest intangible skill or soft skill for Cooper Flagg?
Well, the number one thing is that is just his mindset. He's a fucking killer, man. Like seeing him in March Madness this past year, like you could see how badly he wanted to win. Like he just oozes it, and he does all the little things, and whether or not he's the 28 points per game scorer, whatever it is in the NBA. One thing I know for a fact is that he's going to impact winning for the Mavericks. Well, hopefully, as long as Nico isn't a terrorist. He's going to impact winning for the Mavericks.
Yeah, I agree, but the two biggest intangible skills I think he possesses in those: versatility.
Yeah.
I think that is a intangible skill or asset that players can have in all sports, but particularly basketball. Everyone talks about versatility in today's age of basketball. Like, can you defend multiple positions? Can you play multiple positions? Right? This is a player in Cooper Flagg that you can move around like a chess piece on a chessboard. He's kind of a queen. Like, you know how to play chess? I don't liken Cooper Flagg to the queen, who you can basically move in any direction, the strongest piece on the chessboard. That's Cooper Flagg because of his offensive and defensive versatility, if that makes sense. And then just his tenacity and relentless motor, which kind of goes to his mindset as well, which you talked about. He just brings it every single night, 110%. I know that sounds kind of cliche sometimes, but it's 100% true with Cooper Flagg. Nobody wants to win more than him. He's locked in on both ends of the floor. You saw that at Duke. If you watched even just a couple games of Cooper Flagg at Duke, plays with a ton of energy and effort. So I'd say the tenacity, and his versatility are like his two big intangible skills, I guess you could say, he brings to the game of basketball.
Yeah.
What about a tangible skill? What do you think is his special trait when it comes to actual basketball? Actual playing of basketball?
I think his special trait is, well, I'm going to say just his ability to impact the game in so many different ways. And that's not that's kind of a cop-out. But let me just put it this way. On offense, he can be a point forward. He can bring the ball up the floor. He can set up your offense. And he can also play in the post. He can play off ball, come off a screen, shoot threes. Like, he is like whatever you need in that moment. Like, and then it's the same thing on defense. He can guard just about any position. He can protect the paint, protect the rim. He's mobile. Like, I think that's the special trait that sets him apart, is just how skilled he is at everything. Like, he's not just, skilled at one thing, and there's not like one skill that he's just like way better at than all of his other skills. Not like, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I agree. This was a tough one, because I think the one thing everyone talks about is his defense, the impact that he can make immediately at the NBA level on the defensive side of basketball. Because of his length, because of his instincts, because of his mobility, his ability to be switchable. He can guard pretty much every single position on the floor. But that's not ultimately what I went with. My big thing with Cooper Flagg, I think what makes him potentially an all-star, all-NBA caliber performer on a championship team, which I project him to be at some point in his NBA career, is his playmaking ability on the offensive side of the ball. And I'm not talking about scoring, really. I mean, he can do that, obviously. But I think it's his ability to make plays out of the pick and roll, from the top of the floor, from anywhere on the floor. His ability as a pick and roll ball handler. According to Synergy, he ranked in the 91st percentile last year as a pick and roll ball handler. That's insane for a guy who's 6'10" and plays, his position. Duke would run their offense through him a lot of the time this past season. He's a phenomenal passer. He averaged 4.5 assists per game. And that doesn't tell the whole story. I think his playmaking ability outside of scoring on offense is like his special thing, special trait that I would point to. And that's important because I think you could, like, the Mavericks can run, I think next year, they could run their offense at points in times through Cooper Flagg because of his ability to be a secondary or tertiary ball handler in those pick and rolls.
We all know the Mavericks do need a point guard right now, with Kyrie expected to be out for a lot of the first part of the season. So that is a really huge deal. And the thing I'll add to that too is he has a low turnover rate as well. I think he had a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio last year, which, I mean, at 6'10", we say it all the time, but like at that size, I mean, to have that level of, vision of the entire floor, I mean, it's extremely impressive, man. And that'll lead into the last part of this, which is the skill that's going to ultimately, X factor skill that's going to ultimately decide how far he goes in terms of success in his career. And for me, what I wrote down was just over-the-top shot making. And for me, it's particularly in the mid-range areas. I think that's where he's going to find his bread and butter as a scorer in the NBA. And from there, you can use that skill to kind of lead into other parts of your scoring as well. Because once you have that ability to make tough shots in the mid-range, you can obviously extend that out to the three-point line. But it also forces, defenders to press up on you on, just any situation at any part of the floor, and you can get to the rim. We saw how important that was for Shea this year. Like, you can just kind of walk a player down and get to your spot. It's also going to allow you to not expend so much energy as well in like a playoff setting, which is an underrated part of it too. Is like for say Ant, not to hate on Ant or anything, but Ant style of scoring with just threes and attacking the rim, like you're attacking between three different guys, and then also you're shooting a step back three where you have to elevate and expend a lot of energy and leg strength there. So for me, it's over the top shot making.
Yeah, I think it ultimately comes down to two things for me, but the thing I put down was perimeter shot making, particularly from 3-point range, because I think he projects very well in that area. When you look at the first 15 games last year, he was a 31% shooter from beyond the arc, but in his final 16 games last year, he shot almost 44% from three during the second half of last year. I think he's a blossoming outside shooter and will continue to get better in that area. If he can be like a shot maker from anywhere on the floor, kind of like you talked about, he's going to be an All-NBA kind of player because of his playmaking, because of his defensive ability. But I think one of the other things I mentioned for Cooper Flagg before we get to Dylan Harper is, don't get me wrong, I think Cooper Flagg is a very good athlete, but I don't think he's an elite athlete. Like, I think we've seen better athletes in past year's drafts than Cooper Flagg. I think he's a very good athlete. I wouldn't call him elite, though. So I think improving upon his handle, like there aren't really many holes you can poke in Cooper Flagg's game, but if there was one thing I'd kind of point to at points in times last year at Duke, his handle isn't necessarily the most I guess tight, you would say. Like, I think there's room for improvement there. He needs to continue to work on his handle. Because he doesn't have elite athleticism, I think it's going to be important for him to continue to improve in that area so that he's able to get better at creating space for his jump shot off the dribble, if that makes sense. But with that, we'll move on to Dylan Harper. Emmy, what is your fun fact or fun stat about Dylan Harper?
My fun stat for Dylan Harper was that he was a 70% finisher at the rim this past year as a freshman at Rutgers. And that's, that's a amazingly high percentage at the basket. Finishing through contact, finishing, just his ability to get to the paint and his explosiveness in terms of that. But to get there and finish at that rate, that's no small feat.
Yeah, that actually puts him, according to Synergy, 86th percentile at the rim last year. Just incredible. It's one of his best traits as a player. Also in the 82nd percentile as a pick and roll ball handler, playmaker. My fun fact is just pretty simple. He's the son of Ron Harper Jr., who played 15 seasons in the NBA and won 5 NBA championships. So, obviously coming from I guess he's got the genetics, he's got the bloodline. that matter sometimes. Um, his brother played at Rutgers and is in the NBA as well, so he's coming from like a very
Yeah, and I think his
athletic
mom
family.
played college
That was
basketball
my.
as well.
Yep. Uh, he comes from the state of New Jersey. That's where he played his high school basketball as a 5-star out of Don Bosco Prep. Um, as a senior, he averaged 22.4 points, 5.7 rebounds, 2.7 assists, while leading his high school to um, a state championship. So, comes from a really athletic family, a really successful family, and is obviously really good himself. So, what is your intangible skill for Dylan Harper?
Well, I think I think the intangible skill for me is the
Or is
fact that he's
intangible?
6'6", um, and
Yeah.
is a ball handling guard. Um, to be at that size,
Mm-hmm.
like that's big for for a team to have a point guard at 6'6". That gives you a lot of lineup versatility, and it gives your coach a lot of options in terms of how you want to set up your lineups.
Yeah, that was mine as well. His physicality, just a strong physical frame, makes him just an incredibly like poised playmaker and potent offensive threat. Not a lot of guards are his size. Um, he's not really uber athletic, but just his overall like body build and physicality that he can play with on both ends. That's something you can't teach, and so that's why it's kind of like an intangible trait. What is your tangible? Like, what is the big thing? If you had to pitch Dylan Harper, what does he do special on the basketball court?
Well, I mean, he's just a microwave scorer. I think that's the thing for me. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think he has a bad rap in terms of, you know, maybe shooting some tough shots, but I think in order to be successful as a scorer in the NBA, you have to start with a certain level of confidence, and he definitely has that. I'll say that.
Yeah, I think it's his shot creation. Um, Again, like he's gonna be at this stage in his development. He's more of a downhill kind of guard who's going to make plays in the pick and roll. Is incredibly special at making plays in pick and roll, whether it's as a scorer or as a passer. Um, and getting downhill and getting to the free throw line, like that's what he does really well. But I think just his overall ability to create his own shot makes it easy to envision him as a offensive hub. Maybe not as a number one, but as a number two, possibly. You know, if he reaches his full potential at the next level, he can. You know, he's really good at leveraging his body position to create different passing angles and scoring opportunities, especially at the rim. Um, a 1.7 assist to turnover ratio on a 28.8% usage rate last year as a freshman. That's that's special. Um, True freshman ranked within the top 100 in assist percentage. Like that's really good, but I think his overall ability to just make plays, shot creation, and playmaking, it's pretty simple with Dylan Harper. What is your X factor for him at the next level?
Um, I think a key X factor is um, how much does his athleticism translate to the NBA level? Like in terms of um, will his athleticism allow him to be the shot maker that he was in at lower levels in college and high school? Um, I think there's a question in terms of like his, I guess, explosiveness, like in terms of like uh, vertical explosiveness, and whether that will limit his ability to kind of, continue his ability to finish at the basket at such a high level. But ultimately, I think the answer will be yes. Like, I think he will be able to get enough out of his athletic ability and score the ball at a high rate. Like, we've seen plenty of big guards who aren't maybe the fastest guys. Like, look at Cade Cunningham, what he's doing. Like, Cade Cunningham is not a vertical athlete.
No. I think for Dylan Harper, it's going to be shot consistency. What do I mean by that? He was a reliable spacer off the catch last year at Rutgers. People probably didn't watch a lot of Rutgers because they weren't very good. They had some good NBA talent, but they didn't actually turn out to be any good as a basketball team. They didn't make the tournament. He was good off the catch last year. He converted 36.7% of his threes off the catch on 57 attempts. But the majority of his 3-point shot, his perimeter shots, I don't know why I said shoots.
It's late.
Last year came off the dribble. And he wasn't all that great shooting off the dribble. 27.8% from deep on dribble jumpers. I think he's going to need to become a bigger threat off the bounce as a shooter to actualize the highest reaches of his potential, if that makes sense. But with his talent, he can certainly do that. Okay, so we're running a little bit over on time, but we're not too bad. We're still under an hour. I think we can squeeze in Ace Bailey. So, Emmy, do you want to kick us off on our guy Ace Bailey, also from Rutgers?
Yeah, he's a shooting forward is how I would describe him. He one interesting nugget for him is his mother played basketball at West Virginia, and his dad played at Houston. His aunt was also a WNBA player and an Olympic gold medalist. So another player with high level basketball bloodlines there.
Yeah, he's certainly a very interesting prospect. When you think about Ace Bailey, let's see what I have written down here. He's obviously, when you think of him, there are some interesting comparisons that come to mind when you watch him. But just in terms of his background, his full name is Arius Ace Bailey. His first name's Arius. That's an interesting name I haven't heard before. He averaged 22 points, 14 rebounds, 3 assists, and 4 blocks as a junior. And during his senior year, listen to this stat line, he averaged 33.4 points, 15.5 rebounds, 3.9 assists, and 3 blocks per game. That is ridiculous. And then he's got all these other accolades. You're right, his mother did play at West Virginia, and his dad played college basketball at Houston. So he also comes from a very athletic set of parents, I guess you could say. Okay, getting into him as a player, what did you put down for his intangible trait or intangible skill?
His intangible skill for me, this was an interesting one because he, this is probably where you have the most questions about Ace Bailey. Is it just in terms of is he gonna be focused on the defensive end of the floor? Is he gonna be, able to improve his shot selection and stuff like that? But so I'm actually interested to hear what you have in mind for that one.
Yeah, he's listed at 6'9", 6'10", but he measured at the combine more around 6'8". but he's got a 7-foot wingspan. I think just his lengthiness at his size is particularly intriguing. Just some of his physical tools, I think, make him a really highly touted prospect in this year's class because he's on the wing. He plays a wing position with his length. Certainly makes some NBA teams horny, if you will. Okay.
I will never get used to you using that
why.
consistently on the podcast, man. I will never get used to it.
Let's finish this thing off. What is his specialty as a basketball player?
Well, to me, it's his ability to, I guess, as a play finisher. And what I mean by that is if someone else on the floor creates an advantage and he has a spot-up situation, he was 1.241 points per possession on spot-ups, and that's on attacking closeouts and on, shooting the three ball as well. So, and even just one dribble pull-ups. Like when a advantage is created and he has to attack a closeout, he can do that with the very best, and that's a very that's a baseline skill set in the NBA. Like you're expected to do that, but in order to go up a level, if you're doing that at an elite level, that's when you're one of those key players on your team at that point.
Yeah, I put down tough shot making. I think he's one of the best pure shot makers in this class because at his size, whether you list him at 6'8" or 6'10", like at his incredibly lengthy frame and with his size, he's able to get a shot off. Like his shot window is significantly larger than anyone else's in this class because of his length and his size. He's got a very high release point, and that makes him very effective at getting off his own shot. I think he's more comfortable taking and making shots than someone at his age could dream of. He's 19 years old, and so he's going to come into the NBA as a really young player, obviously with only 1 year of college basketball, but he's got an incredible ability to just rise up and get his shot off with his frame. In terms of the key for him in his NBA career to really realize his potential, in my opinion, it's his playmaking and his overall feel for the game of basketball. I hate to criticize. I don't want to criticize or call out Ace Bailey. I don't think that's what I'm doing. But he was one of the worst high-usage playmakers in the country last year, with an assist rate under 10. He didn't have a lot of... Now, to be fair, Rutgers wasn't very good. Like, outside of him and Dylan Harper, there wasn't a whole lot of options to pass to. But you just didn't see a whole lot of him, like, making those advanced reads. He was almost... when I watched him, and from the film I've watched, exclusively looking for his own shot. So can he become more of a playmaker will be, I think, important to his ceiling, reaching his ceiling. And just his overall feel for the game, I think, could get better. He often, he can make these tough shots, but he often settled for a lot of tough shots, sometimes lacked some situational awareness. Just these kinds of things, I think, are the things that he'll have to improve upon to reach his potential. His potential, though, is insane. Just when you talk about him as a player, like on the high end as a player, we didn't incorporate player comps into this segment, but like I think you can envision him being kind of like on the best best outcome he could get, like, what do you think Ace Bailey
The
at his
the
highest
first player
potential
that comes to mind for me is Paul
could
George.
be? Yeah. Something like that, I think, would be pretty accurate. Um, so yeah, that does it for that segment. Um, I think next week we're going to dive into a couple more player profiles, but we're also going to touch more on the transfer portal. There were a lot of NBA draft withdrawals. A lot of players who transferred to other schools put their name in the draft, but then took their name out of the draft and will be playing at their new schools next year. We're probably going to talk about some of those names next week if we have time. Anything else? Oh, let's do our parting shot. We're a little bit over time, but that's okay. And I know it's late, but our parting shot for today. Which Texas men's basketball transfer portal player edition are you most excited to watch this upcoming season?
I got to look up his name. It's the center from FAU. It's the kid from Lithuania.
Matas.
Uh,
Yeah, Matas
Yeah.
Moikaitis.
There you go.
I think it's how you say it.
He we talked about him a bit when he signed with Texas, but
Mid.
to me, it's a center presence that Texas just hasn't had. A true 7-footer, a finisher at the rim roller, has a post game. I mean, I can see him averaging 15 and 11, and I don't say that lightly. For someone averaging that in the SEC, that's not a small thing.
Yeah, in the SEC, that would be incredible if he's able to do that. But he certainly has the
And I
potential to
don't
do
say
that.
15 and 11 by the way necessarily for this year in particular. I could see that maybe 2 years down the line.
Yeah. There were a lot of options for me. I wanted to pick someone different than Emmy. Texas has added, I think it's 5 transfer portal players. And I think they have a scholarship. They still have a scholarship or 2 to work with, so there could be more coming. I think there will be more coming soon. But I was down to Dalen Swain, the forward from Xavier that Sean Miller, brought over from Xavier, and Simeon Wilcher, a guard from St. John's. I'm really excited to watch both of them, but I went with Simeon Wilcher, who's a guard that Texas got committed late April. I think he was their latest portal addition from St. John's, one of the best teams in the country last year. I think he has 2 years of eligibility left, averaged 8 points per game, 6'4", 200 pounds, 190, 195 pounds. Really versatile, solid defender. The key for him will just be consistency of his perimeter shot. Texas needs more consistency outside of maybe just like a Cam Heide or a Jamon Mark. They need more consistency when it comes to perimeter shooting. So I think Simeon Wilcher will be an interesting guy with multiple years of eligibility left to watch this coming year at Texas. So that's a little fun parting shot, but we're going to wrap it up. This has been Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports here on Wednesday, June 4th. You'll likely be listening to this Friday, June 6th or Saturday, June 7th. My name is Michael Wein. You can find me at Michael_Wein1 on X. You can find my co-host Emmy at Emmy_Nixon on X. We'll be back next week for actually a 2-part Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports, where we'll get into transfer portal, more Texas football recruiting, and more NBA draft stuff. It's a loaded time of year. Hopefully you stay tuned here for all your Texas Longhorns news and analysis. But we'll see you next week. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the rest of the Women's College World Series. Hopefully the Horns can lock it up. And we'll be back next week to talk more baseball as well. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. And we'll see you next week. Hook 'em horns, y'all. Peace. Piece it. Piece it together.